Hey everyone, welcome to our brand new show on digital health, which is called Digital Health Inside Out. It's the dawn of 2025, and we decided there is no better time to dive into the heated, sometimes messy, but always fascinating world of healthcare technology. Now, you might be wondering, how is our show going to be different from many other shows? That's a good question. We're not here to just sugarcoat or trash talk, well, maybe a little bit, but to explore every topic from multiple angles. No more focusing only on the shiny positive side. Instead, we promise a full independent examination of the issues that really matter. Because let's face it, I think one of the most important pieces there is missing in healthcare is transparency. And that's what we're going to try to change. Are we going to succeed? Well, you as our audience, you tell us and you decide. But if you're up for honest debates, surprise facts, and fresh perspective, then do us a favor. Hit that subscribe button, please, and give a thumbs up for this video if you think we've earned it. So let's get started. Every episode, we're going to try to talk about a specific topic, of course, related to technology and healthcare. And today's topic is why every medical AI is garbage and why nobody really cares. And I have an amazing group of experts with me today. My co-host, Sergey Pilevikov. Also, we have Dr. Hugh Harvey and Taya LaCroix. So let's start with your short intro. Just tell our audience a little bit about your background so they know where you're coming from. Let's start with you, Taya.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Again, my name is Taya LaCroix. I am the Senior Vice President of Innovation and Growth at Impenza Advisors. I have 20 years of experience in healthcare. I started out as a distribution and an OR rep, and then flipped over to the data side where I helped hospitals all over the country automate their supply chain data. So I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Hugh?
Hi, thank you for having me, Alex. I'm Hugh Harvey. I'm a radiologist from the UK. I left radiology about 8 years ago now, and I've been in clinical AI, mainly from a regulatory perspective. I run a business called Hygiene Health, and we help people get FDA clearances and CE marking for AI developed medical devices.
Awesome. Thank you. Sergey?
Yes. Hi, everybody. My name is Sergey Pilevikov. I'm currently a founder at Well AI. We build software and apps with AI to help clinicians and patients in triage and other things. My background is in math and data science, and I actually before healthcare, I was working in finance. And actually, for the purposes of transparency, I gotta say that, I've had some ups and downs in my life. And in finance, I was actually building AI algorithms for investing and trading. And just to be completely transparent, there was a part of my history where I made a bunch of bad judgment mistakes, and that ended up in me having a criminal record. So for the purpose of transparency, I thought it's important for everybody to know. But for the last several years, I've been trying to redeem myself. I've been in healthcare. I've been working with clinicians and nurses, and I still do on a daily basis. And, hopefully people around me can vouch that, I've been doing my best to help patients and fix the healthcare system.
Incredible. Well, way to start with the transparency that I announced in the beginning. We have quite an international lineup today, which is really exciting. So let's start with our first question. Obviously, for everyone who is going to start criticizing about the topic, we are not going to talk about all AI because we all know that AI has been used in healthcare for many, many years, and there are lots of use cases. But we're going to focus specifically on Gen AI, which is a huge hype right now. So let's start with the big picture. Why is that Gen AI in medicine is getting so much hype, yet seems to be failing in so many real world applications? Sergey, let's start with you.
Well, it's simple. The hype is mainly because of ChatGPT. Uh, I think it's a little unfair because I know, and I've been going to a number of conferences here in New York, and people are working in all sorts of models, and it's a little unfair that we're talking about something that's a great model, but it's had a lot of sort of funding and exposure and hype, and that's why we're talking about it. But on the other side, I have to say that I've been using several of these models, and they're pretty good. So for certain things like summarization, translation, the invention of attention mechanism was actually a great invention. And just a little plug, it was actually originally invented by a guy from Belarus, my home country. So.
All right. Ty, you want to add anything?
Yeah, so I think like right now it's the new shiny object, especially in healthcare, we see kind of like these cycles of people say, oh, we're going to go to low unit of measure, and then no, we're going to go back to full warehouses. And so I think AI kind of falls into, this is the next shiny object that we think is going to fix a lot of our issues. And doing this for so long, I get frustrated in healthcare anytime somebody says, oh, well, let's just slap some AI on top of this. And I'm like, well, we can't even fix the underlying, data problems to be able to match a PO to an invoice. How do you expect AI to automatically be able to, diagnose and recommend a treatment for cancer if I can't tell you how much, those drugs actually cost to deliver? And so, that's where, I want people to get excited about the future of AI, but we need to pump the brakes because we're really not there yet.
Hugh, you want to add anything?
Well, not only do I absolutely agree with Tia, I go even further and say that it's a new shiny object, this generative AI. And for some reason, humans take a new shiny object and say to themselves, let's use it at the extreme of its capabilities in a high risk environment, healthcare, which seems like probably the worst use case for a brand new technology, I would say, because healthcare is a very high risk environment. Everyone around the world relies on healthcare. They trust, hopefully, in the physicians and the nurses and the people providing that care. And the other thing goes to what Sergey was saying, is that these models are really good at manipulating language, translating and summarizing. They weren't designed to be logic reasoners or fonts of knowledge. They were designed to transform text. And so I would say that the application of using them in critical healthcare situations where maybe a diagnosis is required or treatment plan is required is actually going outside of what they were originally even built to do. I think summarizing potentially has quite exciting use cases within healthcare. But even then, we know of the dreaded hallucination rate. That summarization in healthcare needs to be done actually to quite a high degree level of quality, because even getting something as wrong as a percentage point different can mean potentially life or death for a patient at the end, or the receiver of the output.
I love it. I want to stop for a second on the topic of our a little bit over dramatic, but the name garbage. So, can someone explain me what actually makes this model garbage in medical context?
I think it's the fact that, well, if you look at the publicly available large language models like ChatGPT, Claude, Microsoft Copilot, they were trained on, inverted comma, the internet. And we all know that the internet is not a fountain of accurate, well-written, well-sourced, well-cited medical knowledge. Yes, there are some sites which have really good up-to-date medical knowledge, like WebMD, some forums where doctors hang out, or lots of peer-reviewed publications which are open source. Yes, there's lots of that. There's also a hell of a lot of, you know, COVID vaccines cause cancer or autism and all this kind of stuff. And I think that the general data training set contains a lot of what we would consider, I guess, poisonous to a large language model. So that might be one reason, a very good reason why we might consider that large language models are garbage, or as we say in the UK, rubbish for medical use.
I would agree with Hugh. I think, again, that's on the topic of LLMs. We're all jumping on them and discussing them, hyping them, but they're actually not built for biological behavior. You know, we're trying to generalize ChatGPT for everything in medicine, but the truth is, it was only built for very narrow task, in particular in medicine. And the second point, as you know, Alex, in particular, that I've been talking about it before, is that compared to other areas and industries, any little error could be catastrophic in medicine, as opposed to manufacturing or finance, when, you know, losing a couple of percent on the stock market, like, nobody's going to care, you know. Here we're talking about people's life. And so, as you mentioned, hallucination is a big problem. Unfortunately, that's one of the drawbacks of the attention mechanism in transformer models. So there are always pros and cons, as with anything in life. And so I don't know. I wouldn't, you know, garbage is a strong word, but we just have to be cautious when we use AI in medicine.
Yep. And just to add on to that, you know, I always question where the source of truth is. And so, because so many times we've always used the example in supply chain healthcare, you know, when we're talking to supply chain leaders, when we're talking about their data, is, you know, garbage in, garbage out. So we have so many, you know, facilities that are, you know, moving to a new ERP or EMR. But how do we make sure, and where do we get that data from, and where is our source of truth? And I think, like in healthcare, we definitely don't have a single source of truth of this is the peer reviewed, we all agree that this is what we're learning off of. And until we, you know, I think as a community decide, hey, this is the data set, these are the things that we're going to look at, we're going to constantly have these hallucinations and constantly have these errors in there, because again, we don't know where this data is coming from. It's all being open sourced and not vetted.
I think it also goes back to a fundamental issue that medicine is not a exact science. Mm-hmm. As a practicing physician, I can tell you very much that it's largely experience and judgment based. And yes, we do have evidence for certain things in medicine, but there is a lot of art in the practice of medicine. And so even if we wanted to create a large language model which was 100% ground truth and sourced, I think that would be extremely difficult to do, because there is no international agreement on exactly how to do medicine as a practice.
And I think that's, I mean, honestly, you're right, because each one of us, we're kind of like our own little individual unique snowflakes, and our DNA is so different and our bodies are so different that it is impossible. And that's one of the things that we get frustrated with insurance companies here in the US when we hear stories like they want to regulate the amount of minutes that anesthesia meds are going to be given to a patient. Well, you can't standardize the amount of minutes or medication that you're going to give to a patient, because there are so many other variables that go into that surgery that it's just blatant malpractice to do that. And so, you know, I think, you know, Hugh brings up a great point that we can't just sit here and say, oh, well, everybody is, you know, this body type and, you know, this and this, because we're not standard. We're all unique.
So somebody might listen to us and say that, well, yesterday I put in my symptoms and the diagnosis seems pretty okay for me, and I actually bought some medicine and it worked for me. So, Sergey, maybe can you share real time why it might be a problem to use one of these general models that we're talking about?
Right. I mean, my example is actually kind of maybe out there, but I was going to show, we're talking with Alex. So OpenAI actually, when they released their O1 model, which is now in the system, well, I mean, for them, it's a kind of state-of-the-art model now. They actually did a diagnostic example, which was part of their release, which was kind of interesting. They've never done this before. And so I had an article. Let me try to share. This is the example from OpenAI release, which was a couple of months ago, end of October, actually. Basically, they had this example with all these phenotypes, and then that exist in this patient, and phenotypes that were excluded. And so they made a point that, oh, look, our previous model 4.0 made a mistake here, did a wrong diagnosis. But hey, we have a 1 now, and it did the right diagnosis with it, which in their view was this KBG syndrome. By the way, when I talk to doctors that I know, I mean, this is actually, according to them, not an easy example. So they, to their credit, to OpenAI, they took, I think this is like pretty rare circumstance here. And, I just want to, we're all criticizing all these models, but at the same time, I feel like sometimes, especially for rare situations, rare diseases, it's often good to have some kind of reasoning. And even if it goes into the wrong direction, I feel like just talking to my colleagues here, it could be useful. So it's like, think of it as, Dr. House, this TV series. He's eccentric, he's like all over the place, but at the same time, he's full of knowledge. So in the series, obviously, he's almost always right. Here, it's kind of the opposite, but it's kind of like the same story that, I feel like AI is trying to give information, and we just have to sort it out. So I'm making a point here that if you run it, 50 times, you have a distribution of symptoms. And that goes back to the definition of transformer models that, the loss function is built the way that it actually penalizes even if you have an accurate answer. So it always gives you this sort of creative answer, right? So that's another kind of point to make, that it's kind of, dangerous to use it for precision medicine. So anyway, let me just go back to this press release. So this was actually September. I guess my article came out in October. So September 12th, they came up with a 1, and they discussed it, and then they have this example of that I would just point it out, and they're saying, oh, look, with this patient, GPT 4.0 was wrong because they give this Carnelia Delanne syndrome, and apparently in their view this other diagnosis was correct. Okay, so I actually want to try, maybe I'm wrong. So what I'm going to do is just literally copy paste their example. I think I already highlighted. Actually, let me highlight it again and see how it works now. So I'm going to go to my chat, GPT. I'm actually going to try 4.0 just to see what answer it does. It gives us. So again, exactly same example. And I'm not going to go through symptoms, but all right. So 4.0 is not kind of as a reasoning. It's not, it's supposed to be more concise. So actually, it's funny because I ran a couple of days ago. It was a different diagnosis, but it seems like it actually consistent with what OpenAI was saying. And I don't know why it's so slow all of a sudden. It's usually faster.
Can I make a point while you're waiting for it to reply? So if you scroll back to your prompt.
Yeah.
Patients don't present like this. They don't present with a nice, neat list of well-defined phenotypes written in a medical language.
Right.
Part of the art of medicine as a doctor is actually interviewing that patient and examining them, and then making note of all these things. That's the skill of a doctor. Can I spot macrodontia? Can I spot short stature? Can I spot strabismus? That's exactly the art of medicine. And then noting that you've got all that down. Then you come to this differential diagnosis process. And so AI, I don't see where this really significantly helps, unless you are a specialist doctor who is able to elicit from the patient all of those phenotypes already.
You're absolutely right. And this is exactly the feedback I got from the doctors I talked to. They're like, well, it's never presented this way. It's actually kind of an art. We talk to the patient, we figure out the situation. Maybe it's some things are missing. It's never kind of like this clean set of symptoms and what's missing, what's not missing. Um, plus there may be something in the history of patient, obviously. But the point I was trying to make here that even with this kind of clean, seemingly clean list of symptoms, every kind of model I ran in. So by the way, we just ran it once. If I run it 10 times, you can probably get, 3 different diagnoses. Maybe this one comes up, 6 or 7 times, but by definition, it's gonna throw something else. And so that's one thing. It's like you're never sure with transformer type models, again, because of the way they built, what's the accurate answer is. Because it's essentially trying to be sometimes creative, sometimes it goes outside of maybe traditional thinking, and that's why it throws at you distribution of outcomes. In this case, distribution of diagnosis. I wanted to run it with O1 because that was, because that was exactly the beef with OpenAI that I had. And if that one was slow, this is probably also going to be even slower. But they're obviously advertising O1 because it was their kind of flagship reasoning model, right? And so, kind of in general, again, I don't want to dismiss everything that this AI models do, because I think, again, even if it gives maybe wrong answer, sometimes, especially going through their reasoning, I think it could help clinicians kind of think, oh, you know what, I didn't think about it. So I thought that was kind of useful part. But again, it's kind of weird. I think it's maybe because I'm running Zoom or something, but it's never thinking this long for me. Okay.
Oh, it heard you.
Right. Okay, well, it's funny because again, it gave that diagnosis it had. So, maybe because I ran it 2 days ago, it was like all over the place. Well, let's try it again, actually. See,
But Dr. Harvey, from like a physician's perspective, wouldn't this be like duplicative of what you already do? Because I'm just thinking from like a hospital perspective, I can see somebody writing a mandate, or, that, yes, once you put in an epic, after you do your interview with the patient, and once you put all their symptoms in there, I can see them, saying, okay, what does the doctor think it is? And then bouncing it up against chat GPT, and then I can just see like some administrator pulling you guys into a meeting where you're having to like defend your diagnosis versus AI. And, I know how I would feel if I went to school for as many years as you guys go to school, to then have to, argue with artificial intelligence. But I would like to hear your perspective on that, because, how do you see that this could be, useful in your job?
Yes, a great question. I think it's going to be context dependent. The physicians who are dealing with these sort of medical problems that we're looking at, so genetic disorders, are specialists. I know nothing about genetic disorders. I was a radiologist, so I know how to look at fractures and cancer and things like that. And a geneticist doesn't know how to look at X-rays for fractures and cancers. So we all subspecialize in medicine. Medicine is actually a family of like 50 different sub-disciplines. So I guess where large language models may be applicable in just the text format, it's kind of difficult to ascertain, because clearly ChatGPT can't, as a text model, look at X-rays. I understand there are vision models as well that are available, but as a pure text model, doesn't help in, let's say, radiology. It doesn't help in many of the image-based specialties. In terms of something like this, if a specialist is good enough to get that entire list of phenotypes from a patient, they already know what their next step is going to be. Like, they know they're going to go and do a full genetic panel looking for certain gene mutations. They might not know whether it's Kabuki syndrome or whatever the other syndrome is, They might not know that, but that will come back from the report of a genetic panel. So this doesn't really seem to add huge amounts of value to a specialist who's in that, in this space. I think really what we should be focusing more on is the ability of large language models to communicate general medical guidance to the lay person. I think that's an infinitely more useful thing. But that actually comes with greater risk because lay people cannot tell when the AI is getting it wrong, dangerously or not. They don't know. If you ask ChatGPT how much dose of a drug can I take, and it tells you the wrong dose, and you believe it, you could die, and you wouldn't know. So there's an element of like trust that I think is missing from this, and there's also an element of understanding the context space of exactly when you should be using this. There's quite a good tongue-in-cheek flowchart I saw posted online where someone said, should you use LLMs in your work? And it had two options, yes or no. And it was interposed by one single decision point in flow diagrams. Do you have the expertise to understand and evaluate each and every single output? If you do, you can use LLMs. If you don't, you should not. And I think that sort of summarizes it quite neatly, the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, I would agree. So just to point out, I ran a one model, which is OpenAI, is at least, for general public, it's the state of the art, and I got two different answers. So the previous one was KBG syndrome, and this is Kabuki syndrome. So this is basically to the point of hallucinations, and this is their latest model. So models are getting better, but Gen AI will never get rid of hallucinations because that's the feature. That's not something you can get rid of, no matter what some experts say.
I'll make another point on hallucinations. So there's different subtypes of hallucination. The general one is it's just getting something wrong, which you could argue is an error rather than hallucination, like it's an understanding or logic error underneath. But there's hallucinations of omission, so missing important information out is just as crucial. Or getting the information correct, but misspelling or misunderstanding the context of which it's meant to be in can be misinformation. And then the other thing with hallucinations is something I call the exponential hallucination problem, which is if we imagine a future where the tech bros win and the whole of medicine is going to be, passed over to the logic of LLMs, you're going to have LLMs talking to LLMs talking to LLMs. So it'll be LLMs the whole way down, right? If each one of those is hallucinating, even at a less than 1% rate, you're eventually going to end up with complete garbled nonsense because you can't keep adding hallucinations every single time you repeat an exercise or summarize the output from another LLM. And I think someone's proven scientifically, I can't remember the source, that you only have to go through 5 rounds of this repetition before the head of the snake starts eating its own tail, and it just comes out as pure garble. So are we just going to be having these at one end of medicine, or are we planning on putting these the whole way through the value chain of medicine? Because if so, then I think we're in for a bit of a shock once they all start talking to each other. And that gets us onto the concept of what they're calling agentic AI, having AI agents working for you. If they are all hallucinating and talking to each other and responding and replying, I don't think it will take many generations of that to cause absolute havoc with the sanctity of the health record.
Oh, absolutely. And I think we see some of that already just within, I know here in the US healthcare system, because, so many times, especially here in Oklahoma, where we have seen such a consolidation of our healthcare, for my grandfather specifically, he had to go through 3 different health systems to finally get care. We started off at one health system. They didn't have the surgeon that he needed, so we got moved to another health system. And then the family decided when he was diagnosed with cancer that they were going to get care from a third system. Here's the thing, the migration of his healthcare data did not happen through the systems to the final system. And I think, if wherever that patient finally ends up, if not all of that data follows them, which it doesn't because there's no interoperability between these ERPs and EMRs, then it puts that final caregiver in a complete and total blind. And they have pieces of information, but they don't have the full story. And when you've got somebody that's 80 plus years old with stage 4 pancreatic cancer and has just had a traumatic experience going through surgery, you're probably not going to get that. And so to Dr. Harvey's point, being able, it is not going to take long just by missing those few key pieces of information for these LLMs and these bots and these agents to start, hallucinating and just getting it completely wrong. And then again, somebody is going to ask the question, well, who do we blame? And then again, there's really, who do you blame? Because again, we don't have a good way of moving that data along with the patient. So,
well, the good news is not a single large language model has received regulatory authorization to be used in healthcare.
thank
Now, that hasn't
goodness.
stopped people experimenting under research licenses, or some people just trying it anyway. But what I do for a profession is try and make sure that anything that's software based that's going to be used in medicine meets a certain standard and has evidence to show that it meets a certain level of performance. Nothing in medicine is perfect, not even human doctors, but we have to be able to set some kind of threshold, performance, accuracy, reliability that we are generally happy with. And you have to have in place what's called post-market surveillance. So you can't just launch a product and then just let it go and not monitor for anything that happens. So just like for drugs, just like for hardware medical devices, AI manufacturers in the healthcare space have to monitor for what's known as adverse events. Did someone come to harm because of an output of your system? You have to monitor constantly for the performance. Is your performance drifting? Has a new bias been found? And things like this. So it's going to take a while before we start to see the regulators even stomach reviewing one of these systems to be approved as a medical device. It will happen eventually, I'm sure of that. But I think the bar is going to be higher than most people realize because these systems are incredibly complex and essentially with the potential for infinite input and infinite output, very, very hard to statistically measure a level of performance that I think people will be happy to agree on.
Also, I just want to take the sort of devil's advocate, just the opposite side a little bit. Not that I'm disagreeing with my colleagues here. I think, granted, there should be always regulatory and ethical considerations. I do believe there is a lot of positivities. Positivity has come out over the last couple of years, and in medicine, in particular, first of all, we're talking about Gen AI models. There, as I mentioned before, there are a lot of researchers working on all sorts of models. So by construction, unfortunately, Gen AI models, they have hallucinations and other issues. On the other hand, this is the best thing that we've had to date in terms of being able to handle a large amount of text, for example, and now it goes into video and audio, and you can translate back and forth from voice to text, for example. Transformer models, which is essentially what most people think of when they talk about Gen AI, they do all those things, and we never had a model like that. So and that's why I think, when I talk to my colleagues in medical community, a lot of them so excited about this AI scribes, even though, to be honest, for my taste, there are just too many of them and a lot of copycats and AI tourists, things like that. But in general, people are happy about their AI scribes. They're thinking it's helpful in many cases, saving time. Second point is that, there are a lot of discussions in terms of shortage of physicians in the US in particular. And, if you're a patient in a rural area and, you're 100 miles away from the nearest medical facility, talking to AI could be useful as opposed to not having anything, and kind of waiting and see how your disease progresses. Um, I agree. For that, we need better models, but I think there are situations right now in healthcare where AI could be very, very useful.
Well, many important points you all mentioned. It's interoperability, liability, who's responsible if the model messes something up. Uh, I kind of want to shift our discussion into why everybody, and including AI strike companies, not everybody, but most of the companies are still trying to use more general models like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini. I don't know if anyone is using Grok, but it's also up there in the list. And Llama, of course. Why aren't we seeing more dedicated medical LLMs that are trained on medical data? And actually, Hugh, to your point, I think a very important condition to use that in medicine is the company has to disclose what data set was used to train the model. So why we don't see too many specialized LLMs? What do you think?
I imagine it's the enormous, exorbitant cost. I gather to train something like ChatGPT o1 costs tens of billions of dollars. And I don't think anyone has decided to front up that capital to do so in healthcare. I think the second thing is that even if you got the entirety of all medical text, it wouldn't be a fraction of what something like ChatGPT has been trained on in terms of the quantity of text on the entire internet. So I think that's the reason we're seeing a lot of companies just become essentially wrappers to one of these commercial LLMs, which they access via an API. So they're all sort of copycat. They've got no sort of actual underlying foundational intellectual property. They've just put an API. They put their own kind of prompting around it. They might have some safeguards they can put in place, but that's about it. So I think that there have been some attempts at medical models. Google had a model called, or have a model called Gemini. I'm not exactly sure what that was trained on, but I gather it was a more general model that was fine-tuned to the medical context. And I think there is also a spin-out, I think also funded through Y Combinator and has direct access to O1. And they are working on something medical. I can't remember what their claims are. But I think it's going to be some time before we see someone come out and go, look, this is the medical data set we've trained on. These are all the benchmarks we've evaluated. We've done usability studies to show that doctors and or patients are able to use it effectively if we give them enough training on how to do so. I think we will get there. And if they take that to the regulators with all that documentation and are transparent about it, then they might get authorization for use. If we think that, medical diagnosis is a good use case to do. I mean, as a doctor, I can tell you the diagnosis is kind of like 5% of what a doctor does. It's way more is involved in the treatment. And obviously these large language models can't treat you because they can't do anything physical to you. They can't operate, they can't give you a drug. All they could do maybe is chat to you. So it may be useful in mental health conditions as treatment. Digital cognitive behavioral therapy, that kind of thing. So yeah, to answer your question, why are we not seeing medical specific models? I think it's the expense. I think it's the lack of data and the lack of people wanting to be that transparent about it.
It comes down to cost, but in my response, it's kind of like time cost. So think about foundational models. Like we hear about new model from OpenAI, Google, Claude, Chinese models like every week, right? So imagine you are in business of fine-tuning AI models for medicine, and you have clients like big clients like health systems, right? And you're like, I'm going to spend the next 12 weeks fine-tuning this foundational model. So by the time they're done, it's like OpenAI comes up with a new model that's much better than the fine-tuned, by the way. So I was going to share this article that I was arguing in this one article I wrote that basically, what did I say? I said the next generation of foundational models is so advanced they outperform the current generation of models fine-tuned on medical and other domain-specific data sets. In particular, I was poking fun here at Mayo Clinic because it was such a hilarious story. Um, so in May 2023, which is what, like 18 months ago, 20 months ago, they made this big announcement that they're basically testing MedPalm 2, which was at the time state of the art, fine-tuned for medical data that Google did, blah, blah, blah. And they're saying, oh, we're so excited we're testing it. And so I keep kind of like throwing on social media. It's like, oh, are you guys still testing it? Where are you? Sure enough, it's been what is like 20 months. They're still testing it. By this time, even Google came up with new medical model, Gemini, and even that model is old now. So it's like, imagine in terms of like costs when you are a client, and you're paying for this specific fine-tuned model, and then OpenAI like next week comes in and says, you know what, our next model is actually better than whatever the heck you're fine-tuning. And so it's a very interesting environment, and kind of that's why I think big organizations are so cautious about this medicine-specific AI models. It just things are moving so fast, and it's expensive. You pay somebody to develop this medicine-specific model. 2 weeks is outdated. It's just crazy.
Well, will that hold true forever, do you think? Like, I think we're on sort of the very steep part of like an S curve. Slow research and suddenly it's spiking. I don't know how long this spike will go on, but surely it'll plateau at some point. People go, well, this is the limit of capability.
So in my opinion, it's like, if you throw in more compute, and it's been like this, it's been like so many academic studies. So compute always wins. So if you are OpenAI and you have like new, whatever, $1 trillion investment, whatever the numbers now right now with this crazy VC venture capital, you throw more compute. So it's a matter of, do you have AI chips or not? But if you have enough compute, at least so far, and I only see the restriction is just the data itself, because if they kind of get to that limit of data they're training on, I feel like that we may have a little bit of flattening. But so far, and again, I guess I cannot predict what's going to happen next, to be completely honest. But so far, compute always wins. Compute has always won over sort of elegant prompting and fine tuning eventually. So you may have today, you may have a one model that you can fine tune and be very kind of cute about it. Chances are next time they come up with a new model, it's going to be better than you fine tune. That's been my experience. So who knows what's going to happen? So maybe, in terms of, and I think Elon Musk even posted that like yesterday, that we're running out of data, which is kind of weird because he also posted 2 weeks ago that we're close to AGI. So this is kind of two completely contradictory messages. Anyway, who knows?
I was under the impression that the human race creates like more data in a day than like in the previous 5 decades or something like that. So when they say we're running out of data, I'm like, well, we're making new data every day.
Well, and that's the thing I don't understand is that the data changes. And so, yes, technically, I mean, I guess they can say we're running out of new data, but our old data, especially on the supply chain side, our data changes about those products about 20% year over year. The data, I worked at Medline. We had 300,000 items that I used to sell, and about every year 20 to 30% of those items would have some form of change to it, whether it be a product description, whether it be a unit of measure, how many eaches were in that case, did we change the color of the actual product, did we come out with a latex-free version of it? And so that kind of data always changes along with the pricing. And, I know so many times we think about healthcare, we're actually thinking about the patient, but we also have to think about all the things that our doctors and nurses need to be able to provide those things, to provide that care for our patient. And that's where, I would love for AI to have more of a focus on the more operation and business side of healthcare to start with versus the patient side, because I'm not necessarily going to kill somebody if I order too much of one product or if I order a different version of a product. But if I put that wrong product inside of somebody, or if I misdose somebody and give them the wrong type of medicine, then that can have catastrophic outcomes. And so how do we build safeguards to make sure that when we do introduce this to our patients, that we're doing it in a way that doesn't have some sort of adverse effect?
Alex, just add one more thing, because this is, I think, important to what Taya said. I think to the point of, having like exponential data. I don't know. It's my opinion that it's an exponential growth, but at the same time, a lot of it growth is very low quality data. In medicine, in particular, full of biases. So, and the fact that we actually have AI on top of that right now, people started to use, even in healthcare, AI algorithms. It actually multiplies those garbage, essential data, garbage in, garbage out. And so I think, when we talk and we're running out of data, I think we may be running out of sort of high quality data. And personally, I am, I don't know, maybe it's controversial, but I'm especially excited about startups that are working on sort of high quality research based synthetic data techniques. Because in the example of United Health, when they made that massive error with biases against Black patients few years ago, if you're an AI model, I mean, you're using that data at face value, and if you use it at face value, you kind of multiplying that problem that United Health already had in that data set. And so it's important to have techniques that are actually cleaning the data, making it high quality, making sure that the underrepresented cohorts of patients are actually represented as they are in real life, as opposed to in that particular data set where they're underrepresented, and therefore that racial bias was created in the first place. So again, high quality data, in my view, that's kind of the way forward. And I feel like good academically verified synthetic data techniques are the way to go, especially in healthcare.
So kind of to summarize, I believe why most of the companies are still using this not specialized LLMs is resources in terms of compute power or just money, team and stuff like that, and quality data set. So the question is you mentioned a few of you mentioned that Google is just trying to do a specialized LLM. It doesn't look they're doing a really good job yet, at least. But there's still some startups that are trying, or at least claiming that they're working in this space. And our friends from the Health Tech Talk Show, Kat and Lisa, just a few weeks ago, actually chose Hippocratic AI, the company that is claiming that they are a specialized medical LLM. They chose this company as the scam of the year. And it's because we really don't know what data was used to train their model. They claim that they have this AI nurse for $9 an hour, and it's really hard to understand what they're doing. But my point is that there are startups that are trying to build their own LLMs. And what do you think about these companies and Hippocratic AI as an example?
Yeah, I've written about Hippocratic in the past, actually some positive and some negative. I told you, Alex. I mean, first of all, obviously we should applaud innovation. So anything that innovation should always be there. I've always been arguing that the current venture capital model in the US is broken. And it's my opinion that Hippocratic is the glorified example of that broken system. There are a lot of, I mean, we can go into details, but one thing that's
they're gonna disagree with you. They just raised 2 rounds in the last 4 months, so yeah, I think they're thinking they're. I think they think they're doing a good job.
We all know it's bullshit. So I mean, and we don't have time for this even to discuss here, but it's a big, brouhaha. Basically, it's a very close circle in Silicon Valley, and people who don't realize it, they will soon realize that all these big name companies, Andreessen Horowitz, General Catalyst, Kleiner Perkins, it's a very close circle. So it just happened that Hemant at General Catalyst, he's considered sort of expert in healthcare, even though every time he touches healthcare, seems like he creates more destruction. But somehow he's an expert, and so he really likes this guy who's the CEO of Hippocratic, as I found out. Well, they're old friends, I guess, old buddies, and so apparently every time he recommends to his other VC friends, they're all like pouring money into it. It doesn't mean anything, as I mentioned many times, it's a big, pump and dump scheme. They're raising money to raise valuation at the same time, because they always mention valuation. They're saying, "Oh, look, price went up." On absolutely nothing, there was no like story change. Like I didn't see anything in the announcement. So anyway, I mean, it just sometimes it just makes me sad, because there's so many small startups who are really innovative. Again, the story is great. I mean, Hippocratic story is great. Basically, they're saying we're building agents, and agents is like the story of 2025. Oh yeah, agents. Oh, here is $141 million. At whatever 8% equity. But first of all, people looked into that, and actually, let me share, because I'm kind of waving hands here. So I wrote about this.
So there you go. I promised a little bit of trash talking. So. There you go. We got to that point finally.
Well, I mean, if you wait long enough, people start trash talking. So what is it? I guess I don't know when this came out. Like a couple of months. Actually, it was end of 23. So they came out with this $9 per hour AI nurse. Now, I can see the outrage in the medical community. So let's just try to be calm here, and let's just for a second try to kind of maybe believe that that's the case. That yeah, we're there. Okay, no nurses are required. So let's just for a second like forget about all this kind of noise and kind of people being outraged, and just like look very kind of normally at what these guys have done. And on paper,
to be fair, they're not saying that they say that nurses are not required at all. They say that
I know, but AI I'm just saying, let's just look at what they've done. And okay. They have a Polaris model. They're building agents. So they have a primary agent, which is kind of like directs everything. So as a patient, you come in, and this first agent, kind of what they call primary agent, kind of handles everything. They say it's not like GPT, but for the purpose of this discussion, let's think about like ChatGPT. So okay, so you tell ChatGPT, what your problems are, and it kind of like then kind of sends you maybe to support agents, which is this specialist, right? So I kind of pulled all the kind of reaction to that article, and so there are all sorts of concerns. Even if that claim is kind of the right claim, they're far from being kind of close to even supporting nurses. So first of all, scalability. So this Emergent Mind article made a point that they're too far. Once they start scaling, nuanced empathetic communication to millions of patients, it's going to be an issue. Privacy and regulatory compliance risk that was raised by LA Weekly, as well as other publications. I just mentioned LA Weekly here because I saw the article. This Week Health raised the training limitation. Then I looked at HIT Consultant. They're saying that basically they're saying that these guys are nowhere close to have specialty agents, and in fact, it's such a difficult, complex mathematical problem that even companies like Google and OpenAI have not even close to handling that. So this is in relation to their kind of agentic claim, and this is like beyond the point of that former CEO was accused of fraud. That's beyond the point that he started, this guy Monjali, who is a good friend of Hemant, all these guys, billionaires, made money by bringing negative return to their investors. It's like unbelievable kind of, American story that, hey, you can actually screw everybody else, but actually be a billionaire.
Mhm.
So this guy accused of fraud by I think five vendors that he didn't pay in his previous company, announced bankruptcy, hoping that the bankruptcy court would protect him from paying these companies. While the lawsuits are still ongoing, he started Hippocratic AI with his buddy Hemant and Andreessen Horowitz, who just blindly give money apparently to all of their buddies. And that's what we're dealing with. So again, this is like a bad case. I believe, again, it's a lot of sort of alleged here, so don't kind of quote me on this. But the more I dug in, it's like not a very cautious story.
All right,
Again, I want to
Sergey,
emphasize that.
I see you. I see you. You got going. I need to
Yeah.
interrupt you for a
All right, I'm
sec.
gonna stop there.
Yeah,
I do want to show you guys something really quick if I can pull up there's two things that really kind of stuck out to me when I was looking at Hippocratic AI's website, and it's two things right here. One, it says do no harm oath. So they make everybody that joins the company give the Hippocratic oath, which and part of me, I don't mind that, but then again, if there's clinicians and folks that that are already have already given this oath, why are we having to give it again, and why do you have to do it in front of the entire company? So that's kind of like a very cultish type thing that first kind of jumps out to me, that they're like telling me. But then the second thing that was like, whoa, wait a minute, because at first, like on the surface, it's like, oh, how nice, patients first, we give everybody an engraved bracelet. Well, then, my kind of like devious brain, I grew up playing basketball when Kevin Garnett played basketball. So we all ran around with rubber bands on our wrists. And every time we messed up, we used to pop ourselves. And so, me being snarky, the first thing I do when I see this is like, well, every time you mess up, do you have to go in front of the company and pop yourself and then recite the Hippocratic Oath again? And then, tell everybody how you messed up? Like, I mean, so like there's some things that I see on this website without ever seeing the data that, like, while I understand what they're trying to do for the culture, like when you kind of understand the history of how this company even started, it's like they're trying way too hard to clean up some of the mess that they had in the past. And while if you just take it on its basis, it's like, Taya, you're being so awful, how could you read into it like that? But then I just see big grift. Big grift is all I see all over this website without ever even seeing the data. And I know that that's probably just me talking trash, but that was my first my first impression when I was looking at this.
Yeah, I haven't really heard of Hippocratic before. I think they're obviously based in America, but I've just been looking up. They don't have any FDA clearance. They don't have any peer-reviewed published papers. So there's no scientific evidence. There's no regulatory authorization. So I don't really understand, like, based on what I've seen and what you've shown me there, how they're trying to capture market at all. And I would be shocked if any sensible health system was buying this without any evidence or
Well,
regulatory.
you'd be surprised. Again, I mean, unfortunately it's who you know. So it's a lot of these VCs, they're in the same circle with health executives, and that's how it's sometimes worked here in the US, unfortunately.
It's very much how it works here in the US, but I just hear that $9 an hour nurse tagline, and that, first of all, I can just see, as soon as the nursing organizations start hearing more and more about this, they're going to organize and put a kibosh on this, because like our nurses are treated so terribly to begin with here in the US, like working 12-hour shifts, constantly being understaffed, this whole performance improvement nonsense that's been going on for the last 6-7 years. It's gone way too far, and now you're going to reduce a nurse down to $9 an hour. That's so disrespectful. That's so disrespectful. And to most of us that have been patients, have such a close tie to our nurses, as much as we do our doctors, that it's insulting. It's insulting. And so, like, again, I love getting a good deal. I love negotiating a lower price. I love automation. But then there becomes a point where I don't want to push out the people from healthcare, and I don't want to remove the actual care from healthcare. And that's what you do when you remove, the people from the process and you just throw it all to AI.
Well, this is just a symptom of late stage capitalism. There is nothing else to squeeze value out of. Let's just
Right.
squeeze even harder to the point where it actually becomes insulting.
Right.
And this technology is potentially enabling that.
By the way, Ty, if you look at all the comments of outrage that nurses have posted on social media, you can probably train a good AI model on that. There's so much. Like when the article came out, oh my God, just the people I talked to just on social media, so much outrage. Just the headline is it's just not a good headline,
No. Yeah.
All right. All right.
Yeah.
Obviously, a hot topic. Maybe we should do an additional episode on this.
Who started it, by the way?
Yeah, I know. Obviously, well, actually, first of all, Taya, I didn't expect KG is gonna be brought up at this podcast. Kevin Garnett is one of my favorite players, so thanks for that. Going to my previous point about the necessity of a lot of resources and good quality data, and we potentially agree right now that startups, even though a lot of them raise a lot of money, maybe are not ready to that, and we do not know what the data was used for training their model. So my question is, my guess is that large health systems, and you've mentioned a few like Mayo, there are also like Cleveland Clinic, Mount Sinai, and many others. I would guess they have the resources to train their own model, and they have the data since they're a health system. Do you think they can actually come up with a specialized medical LLM? Taya, I know you worked a lot with health systems. Tell us what you think.
So I come at it from a supply chain standpoint. So I worked specifically working with suppliers and the hospitals, trying to make sure that they got exactly what they needed at the right price, at the right time, and made sure everything matched. And so while I haven't looked at Mayo's data, I feel the downstream impacts of Mayo's data here in Oklahoma, because Mayo is a part of something called CAPTUS. CAPTUS is an aggregation group for the U.S. hospitals. They have hospitals in all 50 states. And what Mayo does is that they negotiate contracts for supply chain for all the supplies that the hospitals use. And so ideally, you would think, because we're all Americans and we're all taught that we're all treated equally, that is not the case. That's not the case in healthcare contracting. And so where hospitals like Mayo and large IDNs like Providence and Kaiser, they get the best pricing, but then we have critical care access facilities, the smaller regional facilities that get worse pricing. And so that's how it is. It's set up on a tier system. And so as much as I agree that Mayo has more data than anybody, because they get so much aggregated data sent up to them from hospitals all over the country, I have not seen them use that that data in a way that actually benefits those of us that live here in Oklahoma. Oklahoma, half of our counties are now maternal deserts. We just lost another hospital last week. Pauls Valley just lost their facility. We have half of our hospitals on the verge of closing in the next 2 years. And so as much as, I would say, yes, Mayo does have that ability to do it, I don't know if they will actually use that data to actually benefit anybody outside of themselves. And I know I'm probably going to get a lot of hate for that, but that's just how that's the end result of what I see of Mayo using their data here in Oklahoma.
Hugh, what about the UK? Are there any health systems that you think that can come up with a specialized LLM?
Well, in the UK, we have a very different healthcare system to the US. We have a national health service, which was set up over 75 years ago to be free at the point of care for all UK taxpayers. So I don't worry about health insurance. I don't worry at all, because whatever I need can be free. The problem is that it's still a very fragmented and inefficient system and it's slow. You might have to pay, but you'll see a doctor as soon as you've paid. I might get it free, but I might have to wait 3 or 4 weeks to see that doctor. So it's a different system. To be fair, I think I prefer it to be free than have to worry about bankruptcy, which I gather is an increasing risk of healthcare. In terms of data, that it's kind of mythical thinking to assume that the NHS is just a one big organization. It's multiple fragmented organizations. There's 154 hospitals, I believe, across the country, split up into different geographic subdivisions. And to my knowledge, we still don't even have a national IT framework to connect every hospital to another. So you still can't send scans from Scotland down to London that simply still. So it's not as connected as it sounds. That said, there have been several projects over the past few decades to try and aggregate the data and try and do that. And there's been actually in the press just this morning, our Prime Minister has just been saying AI is going to be the UK's future. We've got such a unique data set, and we are in a unique regulatory environment because we're not part of Europe anymore. We can kind of do what we want in terms of that angle. So there are people playing with it. There are people pushing for it. I wouldn't hold your breath. It'll take a long time just to even connect every computer in the NHS. Is going to be a monumental task, let alone start training AI. In theory, yes, it would work. But by the time we've connected the data, to Sergey's point earlier, the large language models will be completely different to the ones we have now.
I guess my last question for you guys today is, what do we do? We all agreed that maybe garbage is a too harsh word for this, but I think we agreed that it's not ready for a lot of medical tasks. So what should we or startups or other companies do in order to improve the situation?
I would say to startups in this space, to really think hard about whether they can produce something of clinical grade, clinical utility, that can actually provide the threshold of evidence that's required based on using someone else's foundation model as the core of their product. I think that thinking is misguided. Happy to be proven wrong if anyone can actually do that, but I've not seen a single startup leveraging a public or open source language model achieve significant success. I think the second thing, again, to Sergey's point, is we don't know how far this stuff can go. And I think whatever you build now is risking being redundant in 2-3 years' time. So you don't only have to have the resource to do it now and fast, but you also have to have the resource to stay competitive over that time. Then the third point is, we haven't mentioned this yet, is the economics of it. Does it actually make economical sense to spend billions on compute and training? Are we going to save billions in healthcare with just this technology? I have my doubts about that because medicine remain at its core still a physical practice. Someone has to take your blood, someone has to put their hand on your shoulder, someone has to do that surgery, and AI will never do any of those things. So is it really worth the billions that it might take to get there? And that's an open-ended question I don't know the answer to.
That's probably why most of the big tech companies that have the resources, they don't rush in this space. They don't work in their specialized LLMs for medicine. I don't think they see the returns once they get there. So that's really the word. Economically, probably doesn't make sense, at least right now. It won't save as much money as they need to spend on building that specialized model.
So I'm going to disagree with Hugh on a couple of points. I agree with a lot of points, but I think in terms of new startups developing things and thinking about, before I go to this big road, I need to think clinical, I guess, grade models, etc. I think that's a difference perhaps between European and American system. I kind of like American system in a sense that a lot of people trying a lot of things, and yes, they're not. In fact, none of them are FDA approved. But I feel like it's just a matter of numbers because if you don't do anything and try to be super cautious, I think it's hard to achieve anything. I think you're right. Healthcare is challenging. I think other areas of technology kind of proven maybe a little bit better in terms of their success. But I do want to point out that we've had in areas like, I don't know, I was looking at a couple of companies like in DNA research using some AI technologies that became unicorns and then IPOs. I mean, there are occasional success stories. I think it's a little, I don't know, again, maybe controversial, but if you're thinking, oh, how am I going to be perceived, and should I patent everything and FDA approve everything? I think that's maybe a little bit wrong thinking. And by the way, it's expensive. The reason we have so many startups that are kind of, I guess, under the radar and with the FDA, et cetera. I mean, these things are not cheap. I went through my, with my startup, and just having this FDA review and verification. I mean, you have to do it, obviously, and certain things you must do, like HIPAA compliance. But I think the more ideas we have, the more mistakes we have, we're still better off in the long term, because in my view, it's just a matter of numbers. And I actually welcome all the innovators to just start something in healthcare.
And I'm probably going to take the middle road here, because so we're in the middle of building our own data set, and it's something that the guys at Impenza have been working on for the last 4 years. And so everyone that we've talked to, and specifically we work on supply chain and rev cycle data. And so everybody that we've talked to, they've asked, well, when are you going to deploy AI? And so Rob Corley, our chief growth officer, always has a great response. He was like, I don't need AI, I have RI. And everybody's like, well, what's RI? And he's like, it's real intelligence. And so, we don't need AI right now, because we're able to do things with the data that I've been told for the last 15 years that I wasn't able to do. And so, and it's specifically with FDA data. And so, as much as I love the idea and the theory of having AI be able to go out here and do a lot of this matching and a lot of this stuff, the thing is that our data set here in healthcare is just not written in a way that can be, really used in a way, and specifically how I want to use AI in supply chain. And so, like I said, I think we are still very early on in it. Do I love the fact that folks are like actively trying to take more people out of healthcare? No, because right now, like, I know here in Oklahoma, and I know with some of my former companies, we have such a big issue right now with so many of our folks being outsourced to, like, their jobs being outsourced overseas and being outsourced to bots and to agents and things like that. It's really kind of leaving us a hole here in the US where people don't know what to do. What do you do for a job when AI takes your job? And so, and when you hear, I'm just telling you right now, anybody that says that they can get a $9 an hour nurse, there, just as a patient, I don't want a $9 an hour nurse. I want somebody who is paid their worth for their knowledge. And like I said, and here, especially in the US, we have more than enough money to pay for it. And so that's where, we've got to come up with a better delivery model for our healthcare, because the way that we have it right now, especially here in Oklahoma, I've watched over the last, 12 years, this constriction of like care, and how everything is being brought into the city and into Tulsa, and our rural facilities and our rural areas are just left out in the wind to rub some dirt on it and hope and pray. And that's not how you build a strong, workforce. That's not how you continue to grow your state. That's not how you grow your community. And so, like I said, I really, as much as I love tech, I still want to see tech being used in ways to actually help our nurses and our doctors be able to see more patients and make their life easier, not completely remove them from the equation.
Yeah, I want to add, Ty, a lot of great points. As some of them are like actually really painful to hear. to your first point, I totally agree. We're talking about AI here. We're all sort of AI people, but reality is like what I'm seeing, like coming from, I don't know, areas like finance, like healthcare is like 20 years behind in terms of some of these technologies. I mean, we're talking about AI, like we're like 1990s here in the US for some of these things, like using faxes and things like that.
Oh yeah.
For most of the medical necessity and tests, from what I'm observing like daily with my medical colleagues, it's you don't need AI. You just need good old automation.
Yep.
So it's like, you have this big expensive hammer, which is AI, and you're applying it to everything, whether it's a screw or a nail. And sometimes you just have to kind of, hold back a little bit and, see what you're doing.
Yeah. Agreed.
Thank you, guys. I think that was really great for our first episode. I think these are the conversations we need to have in order to move in the right direction. Again, as a reminder, if you enjoyed this episode, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Also, you can add in comments any topics you want us to discuss as well in our future episodes. And yeah, thank you very much, guys. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.